Frankly, I can't think of anyone better to be able to address these themes tonight on electoral trends in the EU, UK, and US. So over to you.
So the elections to the European Parliament involve altogether 27 states and 440 million European citizens, and over territory which stretches from Portugal in the west down to the Black Sea in the east, from Finland in the north to Cyprus in the south. So if all of these results are coming together, you get a very good barometer of the political trends that are currently dominating the continent. And also you will see what has changed in a 5 years perspective from the last election in 2019. And in fact, you can look back as far as the first direct elections in 1979. The European elections are in different degrees special. The first thing is that normally in our national systems, we are living in a division of power system. That means, yes, there's a parliament elected, and then there's a government of exactly the same political color, and the parliament is expected to follow the initiatives of the government, elaborated very often by ministries. And if on something very important, parliament refuses to do that, parliament is dissolved, there are new elections, and that kind of unity of purpose is being reestablished. The European Parliament is a very different place because we are living in the European Union in a division of power system. That means that we have 3 independent actors on the federal level of the system. The European Commission is making proposals, but the Parliament is completely free on how to position itself towards those proposals. It can say yes immediately, it can say no. The normal thing is that there are a couple of hundred amendments being put forward, but it could also say the time is not right, we are going to wait a year or two. So this Parliament is free, and our system in the European Union, therefore, is more comparable to the United States system, where there is permanent negotiation between the House of Representatives, the Senate, and the administrations, and maybe different political majorities have to find together. The difference is, though, that we are less destructive. The American system has been set up to avoid decision-making if possible, because the fear of the founding fathers was that too much power could be centralized in that state and start to dominate society. The design of the American institutions is to give preference to society over the state, and therefore allow for state decision-making only under very difficult circumstances. It's also more difficult to live in a system of 2 political actors, one being a majority, the other being the minority, than it is in the European Parliament, where we have 7 political families and everybody is a minority, so everybody needs to cooperate. So the culture in the European Parliament is a culture of cooperation and not of antagonism. Members are not sitting like in the House of Commons at a distance of 2 swords lengths. We know why 2 swords lengths was always considered to be useful, because it kept violence out of the place. In fact, our members are addressing the President of the House, the Speaker, in a much more cooperative setup. The second thing that's different is you are not voting in European elections directly for European political parties. You are voting for national political parties or regional political parties. And all those results then at the end of the day are calculated together, and that's then giving the result of the European political party. And of course, that's the frame in which political action is taking place. But that has a very important consequence. And the consequence is that European elections are decided before election day, on election day, and after election day. Why before election day? Before election day, because it is absolutely crucial that the alliance you assemble before election day of national and regional parties is as strong as possible. I can report this from my own experience, because Chancellor Kohl was very frustrated that from 79 until 94, always the socialists were winning the European elections. And one of the reasons why I was sent over as Secretary General of the EPP Transnational Party was to try to make the EPP the strongest political force in the European Union, and therefore goes with it the claim to the leading offices. So how do you do that? You do that through mergers and acquisitions. You try to find partners, as we did, the French Gaullist in France, Forza Italia, PSD in Portugal, the Nordic conservative parties, which were just observers, and also a very open approach in the East. So we changed the approach of the EPP to something very inclusive, welcoming liberal and conservative parties as equal partners as well. And the outcome was in 99 that the EPP became for the first time the strongest force in the European Union and has stayed in that position now for a quarter of a century, establishing the basis for the presidencies of the Commission of Ursula von der Leyen, of Jean-Claude Juncker, and 2 terms of José Manuel Durão Barroso. Of course, elections are also decided on election day, but they're also decided after the election, because normally there are roughly 50 members elected to the House who do not yet have a political family. So where are they going to go? Which group are they going to adhere to? So if you are narrowly number 2 on election day, you can still make it to number 1. If you are narrowly number 1 on election day, you can still fall back to number 2. So European elections are decided by the strength of alliance and by the voters before election day, on election day, and after election day. Third remark I would like to make is that with these elections, the Spitzenkandidat is back. I have to insist on the German expression of Spitzenkandidat instead of lead candidate, because up to now we have not been very successful in the English language. Up to now we could only make reference to kindergarten, which is not very satisfactory. So that's why we insist so much to have Spitzenkandidaten as well. In 2014, I was accused in a portrait on page 3 of the Financial Times, never before, never later, to have been the devious mind behind the Spitzenkandidaten idea. I was not the only devious mind, but I was one of the devious minds. And why is it so important? Basically for 2 reasons. The first thing is that national parties normally view European elections as an excellent opportunity to save money and not to spend it, and to preserve those amounts for the next national elections. That means without the personalization of the Spitzenkandidaten, you have a very short and superficial campaign. Since the introduction of the Spitzenkandidaten, we now get press-free, cost-free media coverage 6 months before the event, because you can discuss who should be the next president of the Commission. Should it be Ursula von der Leyen? Or should it be rather somebody out of France? Or last time round, should it have been Jean-Claude Juncker another time? What are his shortcomings? Does he maybe have a drink too much? Or is he smoking? Is this good? What about Martin Schulz? So these debates are fascinating and give a lot of free media coverage, which is worth in the millions and allows for a much longer debate. And in fact, since Spitzenkandidaten have been introduced, voter participation has been stabilized, and last time it went 8% up. So what are we expecting for these elections? I expect that all political families for the first time will have Spitzenkandidaten. Given that the liberal group consists of 3 political families, they will have 3 Spitzenkandidaten, each for their own family, but every family up to the extreme right, included most probably, will have Spitzenkandidaten, for the reason that this is giving access to the general public. There are also figures in the European Parliament about likely participation. Of course, we don't know, but we ask people, is it likely or very likely that you're going to participate in the vote? And then you can compare the results to 5 years earlier. And the figures we are getting right now are 9% higher than 5 years earlier. So that's an early indication, not a proof, but an early indication that voting participation might not go down, but rather go up. There are also more and more professional aggregated data available on how many members political groups can expect. One of them is Politico, the Adenauer Foundation with our friend Olaf Winczek is producing this as well in a very professional way. And we've come a long way over the last 30 years. My experience is that these figures are highly reliable. You might have a deviation for a major group of plus minus 15 seats. That means if the advantage on election day of one group over the other before election day is 30 seats, you're pretty safe that this group is going to be number 1. The current situation is roughly that the EPP and the Socialists can roughly expect the same number of seats as last time. You see in the official figures small losses, but that can be compensated by the 50s who haven't yet found a home. The EPP being roughly around 180 seats, which is 25% of the seats available, and the Socialists roughly at 140 seats. And that figure has been widening over the last months. The big losers seem to be the Liberal group and the Green group, also provoked by the fact that last time round in 2019, the results of the Liberals and the Greens in Britain were extraordinarily good as an effect of protest against the Brexit vote. So among themselves, they could lose somewhere between 40 and 50 seats, which is, given their size, enormous. Those seats you would find back in the right and in the extreme right, which would be growing. And of course, Parliament is going to be bigger, going to be increased from 705 to 720 members. We are witnessing since 2009 a slow but steady process of increase of seats on the right and of the extreme right, which every single time is not overly spectacular, but the cumulative effect over many elections changes the picture quite fundamentally. That will force us now to develop a closer and more precise look on who is extreme. Is everybody extreme, or do we have criteria on the right of the EPP, as well as very much on the very left in the European Parliament, for who is extreme? I've been writing an article about this in France, in Le Grand Continent, which was also published by the Martin Center's European View on the future of the center-right and the 70s. And the proposal I'm making to judge who is extreme and who is on the right but not extreme is that in the view of every system, those are extreme who try to destroy the system itself. So if we go through as a thought experiment of this argument, then we have to answer the question, what are the pillars of the system in Western Europe since after 1945? And I would argue that these are essentially three. One, the general willingness for European integration. That doesn't mean that you have to be a federalist, but it means that you should be ready to compromise and find solutions in the common interest. If that readiness would not be there, the continent would look very, very differently. Secondly, and here I can't help it as a German Christian Democrat, transatlantic partnership. Transatlantic partnership was a precondition for our security. Without the engagement of the United States, the Soviet Union would have dominated also the western part of the continent, at least Germany and some other countries. So the readiness to invest in transatlantic partnership for me is a second pillar, because if we think this away for a second, we would be in a very different place on the European continent. And the third is, of course, parliamentary democracy, rule of law, pluralism. So if we apply these three criteria, we are seeing that some political forces, in fact, let's say, are doubtful on all the three. We can mention Vlaams Belang, we can mention the party of Mr. Wilders, we can mention Le Pen, we surely have to mention the AfD party in Germany. Whereas there are others to the right of the EPP, which are constructive in Europe, which are in favor of transatlantic cooperation, and which are not endangering parliamentary democracy and pluralism. And I would mention here the party of Madame Meloni in Italy. I would also mention ODS in the Czech Republic, and I would also mention the NBA party in Belgium. So that means when we are looking at the spectrum to the right of the EPP, there are parties which are on the right and not us, but they're not extreme right. And there are parties which are extreme and try to destroy the system, and which therefore cannot be partners for cooperation, or at least not for close cooperation. So with that having been said, the question is, what do we expect then to happen once the election is over? Any Commission president needs a qualified majority in the sense of 361 votes out of 720. EPP Socialist Liberals can expect to gather around 400 seats, 400 votes, but we know from last time that the coherence in voting is not 100%, is not 90%, is maybe rather in the area of 85%, if not 80%. And that means that de facto, probably these three together will not be enough, given that they are shrinking by 30 seats compared to last time. So who can we expect to join a presidential majority? I would expect those members of parliament to join a presidential majority whose party leader and prime minister has been nominating that person already in the European Council. And that means the members of Fratelli d'Italia and the members of ODS in the Czech Republic. Together with the three parties in the center, that could provide a sufficient number of votes to elect a Commission president, but it might still be tight. The question is, therefore, will also the Greens be ready to vote for the first time in 20 years a Commission president? They did not vote as a political group for Ursula von der Leyen, even though she promised the Green Deal. They did not vote for Jean-Claude Juncker, even though he's rather a left-leaning Christian Democrat. I think he would be very happy to be described like this. They did not vote for Barroso II. They did not vote for Barroso I. So are they ready to vote, for example, for von der Leyen II, or aren't they ready? This will be one of the major issues to be observed when the election of the Commission president is taking place. Of course, Parliament is only one chamber. The other chamber is the European Council. With the changeover in Prime Minister in Bulgaria to the EPP after 9 months, and with the yes, weak election result in Portugal, but which will nevertheless lead to an EPP Prime Minister taking over, the EPP will be having 13 Prime Ministers out of 27, whereas both Socialists and Liberals are around 5 each, and the others are to the right of the EPP. That gives the EPP in the European Council a very strong position during these decisive months which are ahead of us.